The last little bit there is worth adding.
Oh, well, it wasn't bolded, and I got scolded earlier that I should. Sorry. All right, we'll just have to edit all this out. Let me take a note. John gets angry at Casey. You gotta be serious with these bolds, John.
I already did trim this down. You realize this is not like I just copied and pasted the thing out. This is the trimmed version. The bold is just to let you know which parts are important.
All right, so let's get started as we have to with follow-up. We have another instance of a fairly long email that I'd like to read actually a couple instances of this that I'd like to read pretty much in their entirety because I think they're really, really fascinating. And I would never generally do this, but now I'm making the exception the rule because these are really good emails.
You do it like every 2 weeks, and I have to edit it in some way because it's like nothing is more boring and harder to follow than listening to somebody read like a 6-paragraph email in a podcast.
All right. I'll try to make this as quick as I can since John has done us the service of bolding certain sections in the show notes. So we got some feedback from an anonymous Microsoft employee on the facial recognition in Windows. And they said all the Surface devices since the Surface Pro 4, which is the last 2 generations apparently, have supported Windows Hello. This is different than Hi Sierra. This is Windows Hello, which uses an infrared LED, infrared depth camera, and RGB webcam to authenticate via your face. This technology is derived from the Kinect and has in general been super well received. It's fast, very reliable, and works in the dark. And this includes a link to a video, which we will put in the show notes. It is also tricky to fool, arguably more secure than a fingerprint, and it can even tell twins apart. And we'll put a different link in the show notes for that. When Microsoft tried to scale this down to mobile devices in the Lumia 650 and 650 XL, the same technology didn't work for a number of reasons, including power, cost, and size constraints, that is. The Lumia devices shipped in 2015, and while the Surface solution didn't scale down effectively then, I have no difficulty believing Apple could scale down to a full-face solution like Windows Hello in 2017. That said, most good solutions I've seen require at least 2 cameras, IR and RGB, to get depth, verify it's a fleshy 3D object. That's such a funny word, fleshy. But anyway, and capture enough identifiers as well as an IR LED to function in mixed lighting conditions. Heavy backlighting and bright sunlight are especially challenging. It's hard to see how these would fit into the quote-unquote forehead of a bezel-free iPhone without significant cutouts, in addition to what's already required for the front-facing camera and proximity sensor. Blah, blah, blah. All that to say, it is fast, dependable, delightful face recognition that is absolutely possible and is in fact par for the course on some high-end Windows devices like the Surface. Yes, it does introduce some UI requirements for explicit confirmation of intent, for example, with purchases. It's just a matter of time before someone makes it work on a phone. I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear Apple had done that.
This is in a thread of feedback with all the Windows users telling us about Windows Hello, which we discussed on the show many months ago. And as this person pointed, the reason I picked this email out is it is a Microsoft employee, and they talk specifically about the challenges of getting it down into a phone, because obviously you have luxuries on even just a laptop form factor that you don't have on phones. You got a lot of space to put sensors in there. You got a lot more power. You got a lot bigger battery. Usually you have more computing power, although these days the phone is probably faster than half of the things they listed. So we'll see. So yes, face recognition on Windows Hello is there. We got varying reports. Some people say it's amazing, it already exists, and it's wonderful. Other people said I can't get it to recognize my face. It takes like 3 to 5 seconds, then it doesn't work half the time, and I hate it. So mixed results, but in general, I think mostly people like Windows Hello and think that it works well. It's just a question of, can you get this in a phone?
I love that like the new like Windows did it is a lot like the old Opera did it. Like that Windows is now so marginalized that like the cutting edge features of like the Surface hardware and like the stuff that's like the whole pure Microsoft stack, hardware to software, like so few people, relatively speaking, are using that and enjoying that to the point, especially like around these parts, around like, you know, Apple-y tech podcast circles, that we have no idea what they're doing. And they're so like, and they're doing important stuff and innovative stuff. And they just want everyone to know that so much. And meanwhile, we're all like, no one's ever done this before. Like it's exactly why the Opera people were always so mad. Like, because Opera was doing all these great features that other browsers would add 5 years later and act like no one had ever done them before. And everyone else believed it.
But the reason people didn't know about it because of Opera, in the case of Opera, is that Opera would fall down on like the basics. Like that people didn't use it not just because it was obscure and weird, but because it just wasn't as good a web browser in most cases these other ones for like boring practical reasons. You know?
Yeah, Windows is not as good of an operating system. That's why we don't use these things.
Anyway, so Windows certainly doesn't have the mind share, but like Windows Hello, like I said, we talked about it on this very podcast. So it's not like we didn't know that it existed. And a lot of these features, I mean, I think we talked about the Samsung face recognition. A lot of these features we do know have even been tried in phone form factors before. But you know, the reason we don't like have them in front of mind is because, I mentioned the Amazon Fire Phone last time with like the 5 cameras and all the sensors and everything. Is like if they don't work really well, it's like, oh well, yeah, they tried to do a thing, but they essentially failed. And so it will rise to the level of public consciousness if it becomes popular and everyone agrees that it works really well. And because if it worked really well, it would be everywhere and every phone would be using it. And so like no one has really cracked it. Kind of like fingerprint sensors that essentially work really well everywhere now. And so they're very, very common. And so that's why everybody knows unlocking the phone with your finger is a thing. Whoever was first with that and getting it to work, obviously we know about it from the Apple world, but for all we know, Android was doing it, you know, years before. But anyway, that technology is kind of settled and it works just fine. Face recognition is still in the realm of maybe on some desktop computers and some operating systems, some people think it works great, but no one has really nailed it on the phone to the point where it's better than fingerprint unlock or, you know, typing in a code or whatever.
I also still do think that there are significant challenges with face recognition as an unlock method around the issues of how do you confirm the authentication and what do you do if you don't want to authenticate something. You know, and one person, I think it was on Twitter, pointed out the example of like, what if someone takes your phone out of your hand and holds it up to your face? And then it like if the only confirmation thing is recognize your face and then tap a thing on screen to say okay, then somebody can take your phone and just authorize it right there in front of you and then walk away.
I was going to make another Indiana Jones reference, but Raiders of the Lost Ark reference, but I know you don't know that one. Like kind of like the watch authentication, where once you unlock your watch, as long as it's on your wrist, it's you know, it stays unlocked. But if someone was to steal your watch, it automatically locks when it leaves your wrist. So I can imagine a similar feature where the gesture of picking it up and putting your finger on part of the screen, your finger has to be there, then the camera recognizes you, then you press the screen or slide in a direction or whatever. And if any point in that chain, like that your finger leaves the phone surface or wherever you're supposed to be holding down, then it's all over. So someone pulls a thing out of your hand, well, it doesn't work either, does it? I don't know. It's a difficult problem. You'd have to incorporate the fingerprint sensor, I guess. But
right.
That's the whole point. The whole point
in
of
which
this
case
is
you have a fingerprint sensor.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid that.
Like, and the thing is, like, the more complex that the gesture is, or the more requirements it has to succeed and to unlock the phone and to keep the phone unlocked, the more often that it won't work in legitimate use. You know, the more legitimate use cases you'll have where like, okay, well, what if I want to authenticate my phone while it's sitting on a table and I just put my thumb on it now? But, you know, if you have to have your hand on a certain part, like Touch ID is so good. And I feel like it solves or avoids so many of these other weird little problems that it would really take a lot to make it worth not using Touch ID anymore.
I don't know. I'm glad this is still a rumored feature, so we don't even know if it's shipping at all, and we won't have to consider this. But well, I guess we'll all find out. I still think it would be neat to like just have it sort of work by magic and just pick up your phone and use it, and it's just automatically unlocked because you're you. I would probably sacrifice that for the security of like, oh, what if someone rips the phone out of your hand? Because, you know, that's not that common of occurrence in the circles that I travel in. But for other people, I mean, obviously, if you have an option to turn this on or off, that would really help. Let people decide what their security profile is. And like we said in the last show, if you're in a situation like in an airport or you're going through immigration in some country and you want to avoid both Touch ID and face recognition because you can be, you know, compelled to unlock your phone in that way, there are other ways where you can lock down your phone so that you have to enter a big long password, which they would have to, you know, use. What was it? Rubber hose cryptography, pipe wrench cryptography. This, depending on what version, whether it's from the XKCD comic or from the idea that the XKCD comic is derived from, they just beat you with a pipe wrench until you tell them the password.
This reminds me also of the watch unlock on the desktop. So if you have an Apple Watch that is actively unlocked, you're I forget the exact requirements. I think you're all on the same like iCloud account or something like that. And you've enabled everything on every device. Then what you can do is if your watch is physically close to, say, your iMac or something like that, and you tap a keyboard button or a mouse button to wake it up, then it will see if your watch is nearby. And if it's nearby and it's authenticated, etc., then it will go ahead and unlock the Mac for you. And that seems perfectly reasonable until you think about, say, an office where, most of us work in cubicles. And so what if I'm a couple cubes down or maybe the next cube over and somebody goes up to my work machine and, smacks the keyboard and it feels like my watch is close enough, then guess what? That thing's getting unlocked. And on the surface, that's terrible. But in reality, you should, in theory, be close enough that you can hopefully see what is going on with your device. And if you're not close enough to see what's going on, it hopefully wouldn't allow itself to be unlocked. But it's a similar kind of problem, right? Where there's a pretty reasonable explanation or expectation, I should say, that you are close and that is the intended result is for your device to unlock. But you don't know for sure. Now, the difference is, which I didn't get a chance to talk to before the chat room started yelling at me, that you get a notification on your watch, hey, such and such has been unlocked. But it, to me, rings a similar set of potential problems. And for me, it's been working out really well, and it's super convenient. So I kind of agree with you, John, that in the circles I travel in, I'm not too worried about it.
By the way, Casey, as the person who knows that they've seen Raiders, do you know what reference I was going to make before I bailed?
No, I definitely don't. I've seen Raiders many times, but I do not know the reference.
The beginning bit with the idol, where you got to take the idol off, but put a sandbag that you can wait, like someone to take something out of your hand, but while maintaining contact with the part that you're... It's kind of like stealing your watch while keeping something touching the sensor on the bottom so it stays unlocked. I bet Apollo Robbins could do that.
I was just about to ask, who's that guy that can do that unbelievable, stealing stuff while you're talking to him?
That's his next level. He gets an Apple sponsorship. Like, he can remove people's watches without them knowing, but can you do it while at the same time, like, keeping something touching the proximity sensors underneath the watch so it remains unlocked? That's the trick.
All right, moving on. Before I get stuck in some Apollo Robbins videos because they are mesmerizing. All right. An anonymous Apple source familiar with mDNSResponder has also written in. They said, now I'm quoting, you said, mDNSResponder was a mess and had tons of bugs.
John said that. We didn't say that.
Fair enough. I couldn't let that pass without a response. The reasons for the Bonjour rewrite were entirely political, nothing to do with mDNSResponder. If you're a manager looking for something for your team to do, rewriting some extra software seems much safer and existing software, seems much safer and much more predictable than thinking of something new for yourself. Rewriting something from scratch, as we all know, is a terrible idea. And there's a link to the seminal Joel and Software blog post about this very thing. Coming back to the email, if you measure it in admittedly crude, simple numerical terms of number of devices deployed, mDNSResponder is arguably the most successful piece of software ever to come out of Apple. As well as being on almost every Apple product, it's also many other devices, almost all network printers, TiVo, network cameras, etc., and in every Android device, which is not just Android phones and tablets, but also Android-based accessories. If you consider the quality and robustness of the mDNSResponder code is illustrated by the fact that even after being neglected for 5 years, finding an old copy of mDNSResponder from a previous OS version and installing it on Yosemite still worked better than Discovery D software Apple briefly shipped before reverting back to mDNSResponder. I'm amused that you heard that the return to mDNSResponder was instigated by a celebrity emailing Tim Cook. You're right about that part, except it wasn't Bono.
Wasn't Bono. It was Vince Cerf.
Fair enough. And who is Vince Cerf? Can you explain to the audience?
That's why we have linked to the Wikipedia page. One of the fathers of the internet. An old guy who did lots of important work on the early internet.
Is that you?
No, I'm not that old. First, getting back to the part of this of mDNSResponder being a buggy, there's a basis for that. Like, first of all, being neglected for 5 years is never good for any piece of software. Second, as a regular user, it was not uncommon to have weird problems with your Mac and to have the solution be killing mDNSResponder, right? I don't know if you guys remember that, but I certainly do, right? So whether you want to consider it a buggy mess or whatever, it is something that would be a candidate for, hey, this essential piece of the system seems like it might be getting a little creaky, and if someone has a good idea about how to vastly improve it, by all means, do it. The Joel and Software thing about things you should never do, you should never rewrite software, blah, blah. that's been hashed out to death. I mean, it's a good presentation of one side of a particular issue, but of course, sometimes you do have to rewrite things. So many good things that we love came from the decision to rewrite things. You just have to know when to do it and when not to do it, which was basically Joel's point, but it was expressed in a very hyperbolic way of like, oh, you should just totally never do this. Let me tell you all the great things that are about like software that already has all the corner cases and, all the education, all the things that you've learned over the years, right? Baked into it. But on the Mac, we have examples of rewrites that are great, and a lot of important things that we have on the Mac today are because someone decided to abandon some old code and rewrite it, and we have some cautionary tales. So I think there's a reasonable mix, and I think it's not out of bounds to say that mDNSResponder was a candidate, because it did cause real world problems for regular people. It wasn't zapping the PRAM point, but it was the point at a certain point in the history of the Mac that killing mDNSResponder to fix a whole host of problems, it became like one of those things you might just want to try because it could be what's going on. Now, politically speaking, who knows? Maybe that's because they said, oh, just don't ever fix mDNSResponder for 5 years. Whoever this person wrote in seemed to think the project was neglected. But obviously, Discovery D was not a successful rewrite, and whatever reason that the rewrite was undertaken and the people who did it and whether they had the expertise or really understood what mDNSResponder was doing and how it did it and all the decisions that led to its design and all the things they learned, it just seems like it was not a project undertaken with the right attitude and by the right people. But anyway, this as to the idea of mDNSResponder being on lots of different systems, this is news to me as well. I suppose it's got to be an open source component, or maybe it's part of some wider, I don't know whether it's part of Darwin or some even bigger open source component. I don't know. I mean, I only know it because it's that process that I had to kill on my Mac sometimes. It was super important. And then most people know it because it's the thing that came back to replace Discovery D to make your Macs work again.
Well, I did some very, very quick research. Sorry for everyone who knows a lot more about it than this, but so Bonjour is the ZeroConf networking protocol that Apple popularized under that name, and basically, if you wanted to, use like a network printer or use network shares that were just listed by their names that would automatically find each other, there's a very good chance it's using this Bonjour protocol. Part of the Bonjour software is mDNSResponder, which is like the daemon on the systems that manages that. That apparently, mDNSResponder itself is open source under the Apache license. And so it apparently went into all sorts of things that had to support ZeroConf networking and or the Bonjour protocol.
I think you mean Rendezvous.
Right.
What a better name Rendezvous was. Like, so ZeroConf is the techie nerd name for the technology. And then Rendezvous was how Apple branded it. But then in one of the rare cases where Apple lost or decided not to fight someone challenging I forget what the situation was, whether they just said, oh, never mind, we'll pick a new name, or they actually lost a court case. They had to change it, and so they changed it to Bonjour, which is not bad, but boy, Rendezvous was better.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so it appears that like lots of different operating systems and devices like printers and stuff all embedded mDNSResponder because it was open source. So apparently that's why it kind of went in all these different things and went everywhere, and is apparently in Android as well, which is pretty impressive. That is I got to give this guy credit for pointing out the stuff. Like, that is really quite widespread, and I always just assumed it was just an Apple thing, but nope.
Oh, well, I would add that the idea of it being successful and it being deployed everywhere are two very different things. I mean, there's lots of software that's deployed everywhere. The success, if success is just measured by how far and wide you spread, all sorts of terrible things can be considered "quote unquote" successful.
Windows,
not even if you just take some terrible code in the core of Unix that's just been passed around because it's sort of unimportant, but it's just that's where a lot of bugs and buffer overflows come from. Some really old library and some BSD Unix variant that just gets passed around and no one ever looks at it, and it's just this gross, crusty little corner. And yeah. Anyway, I don't know exactly why mDNSResponder was chosen as a victim for a rewrite, but I think it was a reasonable decision. But it was followed up by terrible execution. So you gotta have both parts of it. If you identify the parts of your system that could benefit from rewrites, and then you do a bad job, you have not succeeded.
For what it's worth, opensource.apple.com/source/mDNSResponder.
Oh, and by the way, now that we know more about the open source nature of this, maybe it wasn't such a good candidate, because when there is a project like an open source project that lots of other people use that is sort of being worked on, like other people have a stake in this. Like if mDNSResponder really is broken or whatever, presumably there's lots of people from lots of different companies that are motivated to make it not suck, right? And you say, you know what? We're going to write our own thing. It's like saying we've been using WebKit, which everybody helps update, but we would like our own engine, so we're just going to start our own from scratch again. It's probably not a great idea. Now, mDNSResponder is not the same thing as WebKit, obviously, in terms of complexity and importance, but if everyone else in the industry is using mDNSResponder and presumably updating it and fixing it, and you decide to go it on your own, boy, you better have the best team available with lots of people on it to equal the effort and smarts and experience of everyone else who's maintaining mDNSResponder. So perhaps it wasn't actually such a great candidate.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Make your next move with Squarespace. Pretty much any project you want to do today, you need a website. And there's lots of different ways to host websites, but most of them are incredibly time-consuming or incredibly difficult or need a lot of maintenance over time. With Squarespace, they handle everything for you. They handle the hosting, the security. You don't have to deal with software updates, anything like that, handling big spikes and load. Squarespace handles it all for you, and you don't have to worry about it. You can focus on the actual reason you make your site in the first place, your business, your project, your hobby, your portfolio, your store, your blog, your podcast. You can host all of these wonderful site types on Squarespace and so many more. And there's some hard ones in there. Remember I said store, podcast, like these are hard things to host, and Squarespace can do it all. Start a free trial today at squarespace.com to see for yourself. When you need, just try it. See what you can do in like an hour or two when you need to make a website for something. Maybe you don't need it today, but next time you need to make a website, try Squarespace first. You'll be shocked what you can do in so little time, and then it's done. And it looks amazing. It looks professional. These are professionally designed templates. You can customize them to your heart's content with drag and drop. It's so easy. Even if you have no skill whatsoever making websites, you can use Squarespace to make something beautiful. So check it out today. Go to squarespace.com, start that free trial. When you sign up, make sure to use offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. Make your next move with a beautiful website from Squarespace.
All right, Sid Polk writes, I was at Apple when dyld 2 was developed and released. There was a guy who worked on linkers. He was bothered one day by how slow dyld was, so he spent the weekend writing a new one from scratch, because why not? It was eventually released in a software update during the 10.3 cycle, but the release notes for it were included in the 10.4 release. The engineer who wrote dyld 2 also wrote dyld 3. I trust him specifically. Also, this is what public betas are for. We did not have those in 2003, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I think people are surprised at exactly how few people are responsible for such important parts of the system. Like they always assume there's like hundreds of engineers. When there's like, I forget what Twitter's employee count was. Was it something obscene like 3,000 employees or something? You're like, what are all those people doing? And then you learn like how many people work on the dynamic linker for the Mac operating system and iOS and tvOS and watchOS. And you're like, boy, that's probably like a team of a couple hundred people. And it's like 5 people. It's like 5, and really like 2 or 3 of them are doing the bulk of the work. And then the guy who did the dyld, is largely responsible for the dyld 3, also was responsible for dyld 2, and he did it on a weekend and an earlier, more innocent time, pushed it out in a software update in the middle of the 10.3.x cycle. And didn't, it was a different time. But even today, like the teams at Apple are smaller than you think. And that gets back to the whole, like, how money can't solve your talent and retention problems. Like if you could mold money into the shape of people, Golem style, I don't know how to pronounce it in this context, Apple would do it, but they can't. They actually have to hire people and keep them happy and give them interesting things to do. And you need the right people, and very often some of the best software is written by very small teams of people who really know what they're doing and are very enthusiastic, rather than hundreds and hundreds of people being directed by 17 levels of management.
Fair enough. Also, it's Gangnam style. Actually, I probably even pronounced that wrong.
There you go.
All right. Anyway, please cut that from the show so I don't get a million pieces of feedback.
Nope.
Anyhow, Aaron Kirkland writes in, on my Mac 2FX, I had... That is not a very good name, if I'm honest. But anyway, on my Mac 2FX...
Whoa. What's not good about 2FX? That's one of the best Mac names ever. One of the best Macs ever. FX. Who doesn't like FX?
It's pronounced IIfx.
It's got an X in it, so it's cool. It's a pun for effects. It was the name of a movie in the 80s about special effects. They don't make those anymore. Now you see them, which is about magic or something. terrible.
Do you remember Movie Magic? That was a great TV show.
FX is the whole. Neither one of you has probably seen FX, and it's probably a terrible '80s movie. But Casey might like it.
Why do you say that? Because I have terrible taste?
That's
You
amazing.
like Hunt for Red October.
Don't you make fun of Hunt for October, man.
I know. I'm just saying, like,
you.
you're not gonna turn up your nose at a movie with like slightly dated sort of tropes or whatever. Anyway, FX was a great movie to catch.
This movie's terrible. Casey would like it.
I know, right? I'm glad somebody else heard that.
It's a great movie to catch on a Saturday when you're 12 years old.
God. I don't know if I love you, John, or if I hate you. Probably a little of both. On my Mac 2FX, horrible name or not, writes Aaron Kirkland, I had a floppy disk autoloader. Why are we still talking about this? I had a floppy disk autoloader that would hold 25 disks for unattended retrospect backup, and it relied on auto inject.
This is the discussion actually I was having with Merlin at some point, although I think it was off the air, about I had this recollection that there were devices that would do the floppy swapping for you, but I'm like, that's probably just something I was thinking of when I was a kid. I don't think those things ever existed, because when you're swapping floppies manually, you're like, surely I can make a machine to, some sort of Rube Goldberg machine to do this for me, right? But this person says that apparently such a thing actually existed. So I had convinced myself that it was just like a false memory. But then I asked, do you remember the make and model? And he didn't. I would love to, if anybody knows more about these, can provide like a picture or a name or something to Google so we can find one of these things and see what it looked like. I would love to see such a thing.
Yeah, you can always rely on the world of large scale backup hardware, like tape drives and everything else, for the weirdest stuff out there.
You can do large scale backups onto 3.5-inch floppy disks. That sounds great.
Right. Well, and because like there was a need for that. Like not everybody needed that at that time, but someone needed it, and someone was willing to pay thousands of dollars for that, probably.
Yeah, Retrospect, by the way, was a Mac backup program, which someone in the chat room was saying was terrible, but I think it had some kind of neat features. I used it for many years.
All right. Any other follow-up, kids?
We're still in follow-up?
I know. This was a long one. Those emails were good, though. So
that's true. They were pretty good.
I'll give John a bye on this one. Because we all know good follow-up is our fault, but bad follow-up is John's fault.
That sounds right.
Works for me. We have a consensus. All right. So, Chief Waffler in Chief, what'd you buy these days?
This was not a waffle. This was just a straight up upgrade.
Yeah, it's fair.
You have to narrow it down, that question, Casey, if you want an answer.
Really. What did you buy in the last 48
What's the
hours?
biggest thing, physically speaking, that you purchased recently?
What impulse buy? What $multi-thousand impulse buy did you just do?
So we've had our wonderful plasma 42-inch Panasonic 85U TV for about 10 years. And it's fine, it's great, but in the room that we have it in, like we have a pretty large like first floor great room in our house. When I first got this TV, I was still in apartments, and it was great for apartments. In the room we had it in, it was a little small for like the setup we had in that room, but it was still fine. So I was just waiting for it to die before I replaced it. And I didn't want it to die for a long time, because a nice 1080p plasma was still kind of the best thing you could get for a while. And I also didn't want it to die for a while because over time, like when I bought it, you could get a 42-inch screen that was like the highest quality type of screen. Today, if you want a great image quality TV, the smallest you can get them in is usually 55 inches. And for a long time, I was kind of hoping that my TV would hold out longer and longer and longer, because 55-inch plasmas were huge. Like, because plasmas still retained quite a bit of thickness and bezel width, even until the end of plasmas compared to the other technologies. And so a 55-inch plasma is a pretty big thing, and I thought that would be too big for the room and for the TV stand and everything else. So I really didn't want to upgrade to that. I also, 1080p was great, and I already had 1080p with great color, great black levels, great brightness, everything else, because plasmas are awesome. So I didn't want to have to replace my TV until I could get a really great 4K HDR OLED TV, because I hate LCD. LCD is a terrible TV technology. The only thing good about it is that it costs almost nothing. That's it. Everything else about LCD TVs is terrible. So I wanted to just go from plasma to OLED. And don't even give me anything about LED TVs, because we all know that's fake. That's a wonderful marketing sleight of hand. I can't believe they pulled it off, but they did. Anyway, when we were at the beach last week, the house had a really big, cheap LCD TV that was about 50 inches. And Tiff messaged me one night saying, okay, we can get a bigger TV. I said nothing.
And within 45 seconds, it was already ordered and on its way.
Why was she saying that? Because she was watching the cruddy, the LCD TV in there? Was it, like, why does that mean we can get a big... Was the one in the house too small for her?
I think she was... I think seeing the cruddy one finally convinced her that a bigger TV can look really nice.
But was this one bigger? Oh, it was 50, you said 50?
Yeah, it's 50. And
so
ours
it was 50
42.
compared to a 42, and so she was like, wow, this 50-inch feels so much bigger. She's probably sitting closer to it than
she also was sitting closer to it, yes. But anyway, I've been dying to get a 4K OLED TV ever since I saw one in Best Buy like last year. And I've already had all the research done that, like, you know, that if I had the reason to get a 4K TV this year, that I would get an LG, you know, whatever the LG 4K OLED series of the year was, because all the reviews seem to be in pretty wide agreement that that's basically the best one out there. So finally, Tiff said, okay, we can get a bigger TV. And I said absolutely nothing about it until it arrived. Because I did not want to bring the conversation back up to have it maybe be back down or have her mind changed.
I'm not sure if this is indicative of you having mastered marriage or you having a real and true problem with buying shit. Or maybe both, to be honest with you.
Tiff did not appreciate this strategy.
Oh, man. So where are you sleeping tonight? Are you sleeping on the couch?
This resulted in she, to get me back for it, she periscoped me undoing all the wires and stuff of the old one, which is basically just a periscope of my butt leaning over the TV stand for like an hour. And now we are even. But
yeah, by the way, the small TV problem remains. Like we have a small TV in our bedroom, and it was so hard to find a small television. Forget about like the best picture quality, just like not the worst picture quality, because small televisions are like, oh, someone's going to use this in their kitchen, so put the crappiest thing you can in it. And it hasn't gotten better over time as everything's crept up. It used to be the good TVs were 42, then the good TVs were 50. This is the minimum size. Now, like you said, the good TVs are 55 minimum size. Everything's creeping up. So to try to find, like, now it's a choice is kitchen TV or 55 inch, and in between it's just a no man's land of crap.
Yeah, basically.
So I'm sorry, what model did you order, Marco?
So I did exactly what I had been researching to do. I did a quick double check before just to make sure nothing had changed, but everyone seems to agree. So I got the LG 2017 4K OLED series that has 7s in the names, and they put a number in front of, or a letter in front of them to indicate, as far as I can tell, nothing except like the sound bar that's included. So you can pay like a small, none of these are small amounts. You can pay a smaller amount to get one with just like regular TV speakers in it, like on the back. And then you can pay like $1,000 more to get a little sound bar on the bottom. And I hate sound bars anyway, so that was not going to be a thing. And then you can pay $1,000 more than that to get like even better of a sound bar on the bottom or something. And so the one I got is the base model of the 2017 one, which is the LG C7 TV. So it's amazing.
At 55 inches?
Yeah, 55, yeah.
So why didn't you go to 65?
Well, first, I knew I had to like sell this when it arrived. And now that we see it in the room, I think I actually probably could have pulled off 65. But the reason why I'm glad, I'm pretty sure I'm happy enough with the 55 now, is that, first of all, it is a substantial upgrade from 42. But the good thing is that the TV itself does not look that much bigger on the shelf because there's such a difference in bezel width. Like the new one has almost no bezel at all, and the old one, the bezels were like 3 inches on all sides or something like that. It's a huge difference in bezel width and thickness. Like the new one looks really sleek and has a screen that is more than 10 inches bigger, but it doesn't look like that much bigger of a TV, which is nice because we don't want the TV to like dominate the look of the room. Like when you get a TV that's too big for the room, or that's even just like kind of big for the room, that is like your eye is drawn to that. Even when it's off, like you just have like this big black wall in your room. Like it's something that is very dominant, and because like our TV is not like in some like back room of the house, it's like the main room. Like you walk into our house and you're in this like main room that has the TV and the living room and the dining room all like in one big room. To make the TV substantially bigger, I think would look too big for the room. But now we have the actual screen size of the bigger TV without it looking that much bigger. So it's almost like we got the extra screen size like for free visually.
But they had to put the Touch ID in the back, though, right? And it's got a brow.
The only thing is, TVs have gotten a lot more full of crappy software since I last bought a TV 10 years ago.
Worst products through software.
Yeah, exactly.
Evergreen.
Like, this TV takes a good 20 seconds to boot. I don't know why a TV has to boot, but fortunately, if you just put it in like standby mode instead of turning it
because it's got
off,
a WebOS. I have to say, like, all software on TVs is terrible, but everyone agrees this is the best software on TVs, or close to the best. I mean, there's some disagreement, but if you want any kind of quote unquote smart TV features, the WebOS things that LG uses are the least disgusting. Let's say that. Because nobody does what Panasonic used to, which is completely utilitarian, minimal. Like I remember my first Panasonic Plasma had like the little volume bar that appears on the screen when you change the volume. Mm-hmm. Was really small and was jammed against the bottom edge of the screen, so it obscured as little of like nobody does that now. Now you change the volume and it's like a giant fairy comes out and waves a magic wand and sparkles fly from it, and this bar full of bubbling liquid moves forward in this pulsing pattern. It's like, oh my god, just change the volume.
The good thing is it's actually even though that the software is really kind of overbearing, it doesn't seem like it's horrible software. It's software where I don't really need there to be software. But the good thing is it also has built-in apps for Netflix and Amazon Video. So
every TV has that now.
I know. I this is again like the Opera people. It's like, yes, we know, we invented this years ago. Like, yeah, I know. But so it's new to me, and it's actually kind of nice.
And it's got the little accelerometer remote with a little mouse cursor thing, which I thought would be terrible, but having used it, it's actually pretty good.
We have different opinions about that.
No, you don't like it? I mean, the alternative is using like a 5-way pad to move a little thingy around. I like the little accelerometer cursor thingy.
I have not found it to have the precision I want. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I don't have the precision I want. But
would you prefer to go tap 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 tap? Because I find it. Put it this way: I find it more precise than the other main thing I use to navigate stuff on the TV, which is a stupid Apple TV remote, where I'm forever trying to swipe vertically and horizontally, and,
that's true.
And it's misinterpreting me.
Yeah. So for the listeners who might have missed what we were talking about here, the remote to this behaves a lot like a Wiimote, where the TV somehow senses, I don't know if it's only accelerometer or if it's also like the vision-based thing like the Wiimote had with the little IR bar, but somehow the remote, you just wave it around and it moves a little mouse pointer thing on screen. And it doesn't, I'd say it does not work as well as a Wiimote does in that way. It isn't as precise or stable. So it's fine. Ultimately, I'm assuming that there's going to be a 4K Apple TV update this fall. Once we have that 4K Apple TV, I don't expect to ever use the built-in software on this TV again. It's the kind of thing I'm just like setting it up once, going through all the picture settings, trying to find out how to make it look normal, and then you just leave it after that. So I don't expect the software of this TV to matter at all to me, after this week.
Except for potentially the boot time and whatever the volume control looks like when you move it up and down.
I don't use the volume control on the TV. Who uses TV speakers? Animals. That's who. We are sponsored this week by Betterment. Investing made better. Go to betterment.com/ATP to learn more. Betterment is a smarter way to invest your money, providing investing advice through smart technology, automated investing, and human advisors. They have changed the industry by using the same strategies that financial advisors use with clients who have millions of dollars and making it available to everyone. This includes smart rebalancing, global diversification, tax harvesting, and more. Betterment's mission is to help you manage and grow your investments and build your financial future, all with very low fees along the way, so that you lose less money over time. Because if you do the math, typical investment fees and costs really add up over time, and Betterment's fees are a fraction of the cost of other financial services. Betterment is also so easy to use that they've won awards for their customer experience. You can see for yourself with a demo account right on their website if you want. ATP listeners can get up to 1 year managed for free. For more information, visit betterment.com/ATP. Terms and conditions apply, and investing involves risk. To learn more, visit betterment.com/ATP. That's betterment.com/ATP. Betterment. Investing made better.
Watching you briefly on the Periscope try to adjust the picture, I have some advice.
Here we go. Here we go.
I knew
this
you
is
would.
how Tiff,
I'm so happy
This
you
is
do.
how Tiff gets you back. It's not the butt cam 2017 edition. It's giving John insight into how you set up the TV.
Yeah. Just come to our house and do it for me.
Well, I mean, it's a Periscope, and he's under the public eye, and he's just fiddling around with things. But in general, what you were doing is exactly what people shouldn't do when they adjust their TV, which is play with the settings and try to think, does this look right? Turn this on, turn this off. What does this mode mean? Blah 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 blah. So you're never gonna arrive at anything that way. So first of all, the thing that Marco knows and that everyone else should know is when you buy a TV, no matter where you get it from, almost all the time it is configured badly. It might still be in showroom demo mode where everything is like super saturated and super bright with all the effects on, but even if it's not, the sort of standard default modes on most TVs is not quote unquote accurate. It's not what the people who created the content were expecting you to see, because they're sort of creating it and mastering it in a particular color space with the expectation that things look a certain way. The only way to get a television configured correctly is to use some sort of calibration thing, whether it's an app or a Blu-ray or whatever. And the tricky part is the place where your configuration thing comes from, like the source, affects how you're configuring it. Like, if you can get a configuration thing to run on your Apple TV, that will, and your adjustments are per input, that will correctly adjust the Apple TV input. But then how do you correctly adjust the input that is, if you use that same setting and apply it to your other inputs, which some TVs don't even let you do, like, how do you apply that to the one that the Blu-ray's in? And how do you apply it to the one that the cable's in or whatever? That's something you just have to sort it out on every TV. But either way, you have to get a calibration thing. And there's tons of calibration things that are out there. They give you grayscale things, and they tell you what it should look like, and all sorts of color patterns. And then you have to basically mess with the menus of your television to get the test patterns to look correct. To do that, to figure out, I don't know what all these words mean. I don't understand what these, the settings are like. Auto, dynamic, fresh, dank. Like, you don't even know what the hell. Like, what do these words mean,
oh
right?
My goodness.
Sometimes if you look in the manual, they'll translate them to, like, the actual meaning. But most of the time what you want to do is seek out on the internet one of those forums where people spend a million years adjusting their TVs, and people have, like, basically settings lists for the televisions to say, in order to get this particular exact make and model of television to pass a reasonable calibration test, here's all the things I had to change it to. And sometimes they'll helpfully say, here's what these settings actually mean. And this sounds like a long way to go. Like, I got to go to internet forums and scroll through like web bulletin boards like it's like 2003 and just find setting packs for people and download them sometimes. And it's just like, here's the thing. You only have to do this essentially once, and then just to, adjust over every few years, right? Once you get it set up and calibrated according to the calibration app, and you kind of know what the settings do, and you know which ones how to turn everything off and what the different things mean, mostly all you need to do is adjust like contrast, brightness, and a few other things as the screen ages and it drifts a little bit. And that's really the only way to do it. You can't do it by looking at people's faces and saying, does that skin look right to you? You will never do it that way. You can't do it by looking at video and saying, does that motion look right to you? You need to use a calibration app. And there's tons of them out there, or calibration DVD or calibration Blu-ray or whatever. The hardest thing to do is cadence, which you probably don't care about, to see if you don't even have a Blu-ray player, do you? Like, to see if you can...
I have the PS4.
Yeah, well, do you ever watch anything that you care is showing 24 frames per second cadence? If you don't care about that, you don't need to do it. But that's the hardest one to do. The only way I've found to do that one is to use a camera and configure it to use a shutter that's open for a second and run a pattern that, does something over the course of a second, and you can see if you see even lighting in the 1 second exposure. If you don't see even lighting, then you're seeing 3-2 pull down, because one frame was shown 3 times, the other frame was shown 2 times, and the 3 times one is brighter than the 2 times one, so you get this sort of checkerboard bright dim thing. That's how you know you're getting the wrong cadence. True 24 frames per second cadence, everything will be exactly equal brightness because it was 24 frames and each one of them was shown, for the same amount of time. That's the hardest to calibrate. I don't know how to do that with an app. I just know how to do that with a camera and an app. But the other ones, just, get an app. And easiest for you have an Apple TV. There are apps on the App Store, like THX apps or whatever. Like, go find one, download. It doesn't really matter which one it is. They all kind of have the similar test pattern. Some of them might be better than others. And just spend a day with it. And it's important to calibrate it both during the daytime and at nighttime and figure out the balance of brightness, especially for televisions. I don't know if OLED's not as bright as LED backlit LCDs, but I think it's brighter than most plasmas. But sometimes you have to make a trade-off between, does this look right at nighttime versus does it look right in day? And your television, and I believe most televisions, have an ambient light sensor. They can be like, don't worry about it. You just calibrate it, and I'll use the ambient light sensor to adjust the brightness for you. Sometimes you want that because it's helpful, but other times it'll just screw with your settings, so you calibrate it, and then night comes, and the ambient light sensor screws with all your settings, and you can't see anything in the dark scene. So if it's up to me, I would pick a good medium setting and turn off all of the dynamic stuff and say, this TV is going to look like exactly like this all the time. Please do not dynamically adjust anything. But anyway, it's a lot harder than just let me go through the menus and try a few things. And I think it's worthwhile. I think it's worth adjusting, because if you spend the day adjusting it, and maybe like 3 months later or 6 months later, run through the adjustments again just to make sure the thing hasn't drifted, and then like save the original setting, and like in the middle of the movie switch back to the other setting and be like, oh god, it's terrible. It's like suddenly everything was that it's like a festival in India or something. We use colored powders to throw all over everything, and suddenly everything is like super oversaturated. It's like it doesn't look right. It doesn't look natural. It looks like someone has thrown festive colored powders over everything on your television. You don't want that. Just ask Merlin. You don't want the powders.
Wow. Oh, my word.
So did you just fiddle with controls and you're like, good enough, and now you're never going to revisit it?
I at least did just fiddle with controls and say good enough. I don't know if I will ever revisit it or not. I probably will, because we only had like one night with it so far to really play with it. So we will probably still be messing with some stuff. I will say, though, that this is probably going to be an area of my life that I choose the Casey path.
Attaboy.
The path of not being very picky. And
it's just one day. In your case, one day out of the next 10 years that you're going to own this television. Just spend the time.
Yeah, you said it would also be one day doing boot camp on Windows to set up the gaming for TIFF. And
it would have if I had done it. But
right. So come over. Take a day off of work. Over.
That's the other option. You can pay someone to calibrate it for you, but I think it's a ripoff. You just do it yourself with an app. If the next time I'm at your house, if you give me some time, I will do this to your television, because it's a service I provide.
How busy could you be? Just come tomorrow.
At the very least, make sure you have the size set correctly. Can I at least convince you to do that?
You mean instead of like fake overscanning and then
yeah, exactly. Like, make sure that it's actually showing.
I think I have it correct. I haven't tested anything that can verify on the edges, but
you know how you can tell whether you have it correct? Calibration app. This is like the first thing they're going to do is like, hey, can you see all the pixels of a 1080 in a 4K picture, or is it cutting off the stuff around the border because you have fake overscan on?
All right, send me the name or a link to an Apple TV app that you think I should try, and I will give it a shot.
Yep.
But I really can't. I don't think I'm going to spend a day on it. That seems like a lot.
Well, I say a day because whatever. But it could turn into a day depending on how obsessed you get about it.
Let me guess. Not terribly obsessed. Also, Marco, there's an easy way to fix this problem.
Stop caring?
Well, that's the most easy way to fix it. The second most easy way, and by the way, I highly recommend that. It's wonderful. Ignorance is bliss.
or have terrible vision like Casey, where you can't tell what's going on anyway.
That's also an easier fix, but it also affects other parts of your life.
Take your glasses off. Everything looks great.
But no, the second easiest way to fix this is to tell John that you have 36 bagels of various varieties that are all on the approved bagel list. And all he has to do is come pick them up from your house. Oh, and by the way, fix the TV. John has free time. He can do it.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I would do it for 36 bagels.
Problem solved. All right. So you happy with it?
again, I've only had like one night to watch it so far. But so far, yes. It is not as dramatic of a change as I would have guessed. Maybe if we went all the way to 65, it might have been.
Yeah, if you went from a crappy LCD to this, it would be. You're just used to black levels that are reasonable anyway. But I mean, I feel, although obviously I'm way more sensitive to this than most people, but when I went from my previous Panasonic Plasma to my current Panasonic Plasma, I was startled by how much better the black levels improved. Just from like when you turn it on, it's got like a logo, like or whatever, on a black background. And I could tell, wow, this is, in my opinion, quote unquote, dramatically better than my previous Plasma. But if you had gone from LCD to OLED and you turn on the LCD and it's just, like whatever, Samsung and then a black background, and this thing, it turns on and it says LG in a black background, you would be startled by exactly how black it is. But going from Plasma, maybe not as startling to you, maybe you don't notice as much. Although I have to say, your Plasma is old enough that it is, still several generations behind the best Plasmas got before like Plasmas went away. So
right, because they got so big, I couldn't upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, yeah, and also like I've seen very little 4K content on it so far because there just isn't that, like right now the only way I have to get 4K in there is the built-in Netflix and Amazon apps. The Amazon app, I had a very hard time getting it to show me anything in 4K.
The Grand Tour.
No, it showed me Grand Tour in HDR, but 1080p for some reason. Like I couldn't get it to step me up to 4K. I don't know why. Maybe it's a settings. I looked in the settings, couldn't find it anywhere. I did. I was able to see real 4K with Netflix, and I watched a little bit of House of Cards, and so that was nice. But House of Cards is a pretty dreary gray show, so like
in so many ways.
Yes, exactly. So I wasn't able to really see like, what is like a beautiful nature scene. Like I want like the stuff they show on the demo reels in Best Buy, like all like the beautiful nature scenes.
You need Planet Earth. Just go get. Oh, well,
I have Planet Earth, but I don't know how to get it in 4K.
Yeah. The other thing is you should go to one of those viewing distance calculators. It could be that your viewing distance and your television size is such that you're going to have difficulty discerning 4K versus 1080 at that combination.
So you're saying I should have gotten the 75?
Yeah. Well, you have to use one of those calculators to see. But I was surprised when I did the tape measure thing to see like here's where I sit on my couch and here's how far away my television is.
Yeah.
I would have to step up to bigger than 55 to really get the benefit of 4K. I mean, not that it matters. Like you don't have a choice anymore. Essentially, you're going to get a 4K TV whether you want it or not, which is fine. But all I'm saying is that don't get hung up on the 4K too much until you've done that measurement to see, can my eye even resolve the difference in dot pitch essentially between 1080 and 4K at this size television at this distance.
Well, and it isn't just about like being able to resolve individual pixels. Like you can look at the screen of an iPhone 7 and then next to it an iPhone 7 Plus. The 7 Plus screen has a much higher DPI, and the 7 Plus screen looks better. And you might not be able to identify like, oh, that I can see pixels on this one and this one I can't. Like I can't really see them on either of them. But
7 Plus is non-native res though. Maybe you're just responding to the blurring, anti-aliasing.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Probably not. But anyway, so like, and there's also HDR, the different contrast ratios. So like, there's a huge amount of improvement to picture quality here that was not just the resolution.
Yeah, the frame rate and color range, potential frame rate and color range differences are what you want. Although a lot of 4K content, especially like on Netflix, is also very heavily compressed. So, not that you're going to run out and buy a Blu-ray player, but if you really wanted to see what this television can do, Blu-ray is your highest quality. The highest quality video that you can bring to your home still comes on a plastic disc, which is sad but true.
But is there 4K Blu-ray? Is that a thing?
Mm-hmm.
Really? I didn't know that. Can the PS4 non-Pro do that?
I have no idea. I don't have a 4K TV, and I have no idea. That's one of the things keeping me away from 4K is I realize I have to just rip out my whole setup because I'm pretty sure my receiver, maybe it has 4K pass-through on like one of its inputs or whatever, but I just have to start over.
Like 40 people in the chat just said no. None of the PS4s can do this. No, please don't. Oh my God, no. So apparently I have to get an Xbox One S X1X. But I don't know what that is.
No, don't. Or you could just get a Blu-ray player. They're pretty cheap, and you can get a good one.
Blu-ray players are pieces of crap. I hate them so much. I hate like just the Blu-ray spec is the worst thing that has ever happened to movies.
It's true. Everyone hates it, but it's still, if you want to get like 100 and something gigabytes of the highest quality video of your favorite movie, I mean, at the very least, you got to get the Blu-ray and then rip it on your Mac, and then find a way to play it losslessly off of whatever device you put it on, which I also still haven't mastered because of the 24 frames per second cadence problem, as previously discussed. Although someone did mention this Plex Valve for the PS3, and when I revisited it and I saw Plex was already installed on my PS3, I think I already tried it. But Plex changes fast, so maybe it got fixed. I don't know.
I mean, the good thing is, like, again, like this fall, when the Apple TV 4K presumably exists, I have a feeling that's going to be my answer to this. I think I'm just going to, like, buy 4K stuff on iTunes and call it a day.
Yeah, you hope they have it for sale. But,
I know. I really hope they have it. And I also, I kind of hope that I can, like, maybe upgrade some things I've already bought. Like, I bought Planet Earth 2 on iTunes, and I know that is available in 4K somewhere. And, you know, if I would hate to have to, like, rebuy the whole thing at an undiscounted new price to just get that, but I probably would anyway because it's so good. That's something, like, if you really want to show off 4K, you need, like, you know, bright nature scenes, but or even just I want to see the Apple TV screensavers in 4K.
Yeah, I was thinking that earlier.
They're going to look amazing.
I don't think the source video is 4K though. It's like I've watched it on my Mac.
I bet it is.
It looks so great. I think it's just 1080. Like when you run Aerial screensaver on your Mac, I'm always struck by how on the 5K iMac anyway. I'm like, ooh, that's blurry. Like this looks much better on my TV because my TV is 1080 and my 5K iMac is, you know, whatever giant resolution it is.
Well, that doesn't mean that the source is not 4K. That just means that Apple is not publishing more than 1080 worth of, you know, streams.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, are they going to remaster those? Are they going to go back to the red 8K footage or whatever the stuff was taken from and remake all of those videos?
Also, if you happen to see the back of a truck roll by Marco, from what I can tell, Grand Tour's between 20 and 30 gigs for 4K, and there are trucks that have it.
But how do I get that onto my TV in a way that actually can play 4K?
If you're gonna see 4K content, please don't make it the Grand Tour. Please.
I know that's
you're gonna see 4K old man wrinkles. Like
no. I agree. I'm just trying to think of something that you would potentially at least slightly enjoy, and typically is well shot and pretty. Yes, I understand your point about the old man wrinkles, and you're right, but. I mean, generally speaking, it's visually a nice looking show. Well, anyways, to get it on your TV, well, why not you can do 4K over HDMI, although usually it's 30 frames per second, except in this case, that'd be fine.
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure that there is a new HDMI spec that this TV supports that does 4K 60, I think.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know.
So do it
John,
with your, play it with your computer.
You should be fine. You have what version of HDMI is that? I'm assuming as well. But I would look it up before I spent the money on it instead of after.
You don't understand. I got approval that I believed I had a narrow window of opportunity.
Well, here's the thing. What Marco did is like, look, if any TV is going to support all the things, make it the most expensive one. And it's essentially what you did. You didn't get the most expensive one because you avoided that weird soundbar crap and everything, which I agree is not a good idea. But that's really all you can do. The problem is, though, like sometimes you look at the most expensive one and it still doesn't have support for the latest whatever that's just about to come out, and so you're like, okay, I can't buy a TV this year. I gotta wait till next year. But I think you're probably safe.
Yeah, because it seems like that the 4K world has pretty much reached like the point that it's safe to buy it. Like would you? Well,
it's close. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's the same reason a lot of people give bad reviews to this TV. It's like, well, it's the best picture quality we've ever seen, but it costs $1 jillion. And obviously, that's not a barrier for you. But for other people, it's like maybe wait one more year, 2 more years for the same quality television to come down from the middle of the pack or whatever, right? And the other thing with the smart TV stuff is over the years, a lot of that LG Smart TV stuff, like I don't know if they weren't using enough RAM or slower processors or whatever, but that has gotten faster too. And it's like when it first came out, I was like, well, it kind of works, but in 2 years, presumably they'll put better chips in their TVs and it will get faster, and it has. So I think you bought the earliest you could possibly buy and still get all the things, and all you had to sacrifice for it was, a little bit of money and some yelling from your spouse.
We are sponsored this week by Audible, with an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more. Get a free 30-day trial at audible.com/ATP. If you want to listen to it, Audible has it. They have audiobooks for virtually every genre, and you can listen anytime, anywhere. Phones, tablets, computers, any device you have, you can probably play an Audible audiobook on it. Audiobooks are great for flights, long road trips, or even your commute to work every day. Because you might think you don't have time to read books, and that might be true, but you'd be surprised how many audiobooks you can hear each year if you start listening every day on your daily commute and on various trips and things. You will see it really adds up. And audiobooks bring books to life. You can take risks and you can try new authors and genres without regret, without risk, because Audible offers their great listen guarantee. If you start an audiobook and you don't like it, you can trade it for another one for free. So see and listen for yourself. Start your free 30-day trial, and you will get a first audiobook for free, and there's no stress or obligation because you can cancel your membership at any time. So with audiobooks and spoken word audio products, you will find what you're looking for at Audible. Get a free 30-day trial today by signing up at audible.com/ATP. That's audible.com/ATP. Thanks to Audible for sponsoring our show.
Before we leave the TV topic, I'll take one other brief. I mean, I don't know why I bother, but a brief run at trying to convince you slash the audience to invest in a multi-channel audio solution. I know you think stereo is just fine. I know you think you don't need a subwoofer and left and right channel is fine. I mean, the way I was going to try to convince you was like to think about how concerning it is when viewing an LCD screen at non-native res, but that is now an outdated analogy because, as you were just saying with the 7 Plus, if you make the pixel small enough, it doesn't matter. But there's no equivalent to making the pixel small enough in the world of audio. So lots of these shows that you like, including probably House of Cards, have 5.1 mix. Like they have 6 channels of audio. Maybe they have 7. I don't know. But they have multi-channel audio. That's what they're putting out. And some of them don't have a stereo mix. So you have to take that 5.1 and down mix it through some voodoo into, do Dolby Pro Logic or something into a stereo mix. And that adds stuff. It adds artifacts and weirdnesses that are not there. Like you're taking
What doesn't have a stereo mix? Whenever I've ripped DVDs and stuff, there's always a stereo track.
Things that fall off the back of trucks sometimes don't have stereo mixes, to give just one example.
No, but most of the stuff I watch is legal. Like almost everything I watch is on the Apple TV. And
when I rip my own Blu-rays, I don't put a stereo mix on them. Sometimes anime things sometimes don't have stereo. Sometimes they'll be like stereo Japanese and 5.1 English, but no stereo English. I don't know about iTunes, but all I'm saying is like the 5.1 mix is available, right? And a reasonable 5.1 setup with a 5.1 mix going straight to it sounds better than stereo. And if you don't have places for the speakers, I can kind of understand that.
We don't.
But I think you do. You've got a big room. It's great, that room.
Let me tell you about your house, Marco.
Yeah. I think you can find... I mean, I found places in my totally awful, should never have any kind of television in it, carriage house weird thing. It makes... I didn't think it would be a big deal either. I held off doing it forever. I have some fairly cheap, cruddy 5.1 speakers. It sounds so much better to have dedicated left, right, back, center channel. It's a big difference. I would encourage you to, I know you don't care that much about movies, but these days TV shows have 5.1 mixes. It makes a difference. It's like Games of Thrones or something. A 5.1 mix with a subwoofer of a good TV show is just plain better than stereo. Consider it. It's not like you've done nothing to preclude it. You didn't buy a TV with a weird sound bar, which is like the worst of let's just forget about multi-channel and just do some weird stuff up front and try to fake it out. I think you have the room, especially with these very tiny speakers. Like mine are very small. Like, I don't know how big they are. They're like the size of a big iPhone kind of speakers. You're like, oh, those can't possibly sound good. They're wired. They're passive wired. They don't need to be plugged in anymore. They're not Bluetooth or any sort of other weird thing. You can get those speakers for a reasonable price and hide the subwoofer somewhere in the corner, and it sounds awesome. Consider it.
I don't think that either Marco or I is denying that it's better. It's not that we're saying it's not better. It's just, and I'll speak for myself. I would love to have that setup, but it's not worth the energy to me to make it happen, because to do it right, I would have to put wires under the floor and
you don't always have to. You just have to be a little bit creative. Like I don't have wires under my floor or through my ceiling, right? But you can find ways like the wires are smaller than you think they are, and you can be creative with where you route them. And I don't think Marco would even have to be that creative. And worst case, Marco can throw money at this problem and actually get wireless ones because then you don't have to worry about it. Like if you want to spend more money than I was willing to spend on it, because I was like, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on a 5.1 system. I don't even know if I like this, but since I'm getting all this stuff, I might as well try it. And I bought like the cheapest one I possibly could. It was well rated, but I said if you want to spend a couple $100 and get 6 speakers and a subwoofer, do this. And I did that, and I was amazed. And they're very small, and so I'm not planning on replacing them with fancier, more expensive ones. But Marco's excuse was he was tired of hooking up all that stuff, moving from apartment to apartment. But he's been in this house for a long time now, so that excuse doesn't work. The other excuse is it doesn't work in his room. But again, this would take more than a day. I feel like I could map out
Yes.
some wire routes where to put them in places where you wouldn't notice them and Hops wouldn't eat them, and it would be just fine.
Hops doesn't eat speakers.
I don't know. My dog eats everything, so now I'm mapping my dog onto all dogs. It's like, you can't put wires in a house; the dog will eat them. Hops will lick them. Okay.
Yeah, Hops will look at them and back away slowly because he's scared of them. So yeah, I mean, and Casey's right. I never said that surround is not good or better. Like surround, I had surround for a long time. Granted, this was a long time ago. I stopped hooking up the surround speakers at least 10 years ago, and the speaker set that they were part of, I don't even own anymore. So it died long ago. So I know it's good, but again, I'm gonna have to pull a Casey here and say like I just don't care, like because most of the benefit is for movies.
But TV shows are in 5.1 now. That's what I'm saying.
I know, but I like what I care about is the sound should sound good and clear, and it should be usable to fill the room with music when I want music in the room. And a standard stereo set works great for that. I should also point out, I don't have a receiver. I drive the speakers currently with a little tiny stereo speaker amp that is about the size of like 4 decks of cards stacked. Like it's a really small speaker amp. One of these little like Class D things, and it's great. And it has a remote support, so the Apple TV controls the volume on it, like through its remote, because it learned the IR thing. Like, it's a great, simple setup. The TV stand that we have is a non-negotiable piece of furniture with the Historical Society.
I know. Discussions are ongoing with the Historical Commission regarding the receiver.
There is no receiver that exists that I have been able to find that will fit in this stand.
What if I make a receiver the same size and shape as, say, an old Bell telephone?
They don't make them that small.
For you?
Even the low-end receivers have these giant cases now because they use the same case design, whether you have 2 or 7 channels. They just put like different numbers of cards in them.
So I think the solution here that we've learned is I just need to install a surround system and a receiver in the beach house, and then have Tiff watch a movie on it late at night, and then she'll send you a text that says, "Okay, we can get a receiver."
Maybe, yeah, we'll have to play
Start
with that
your research
option.
now.
But yeah, so but yeah, like I am totally fine with our basic stereo setup. It's a really good stereo setup because the speakers are my favorites, the Paradigm Atoms. I love the Paradigm Atom speakers because they're like $200 each, so it's like about $400 a pair, and they are the best bookshelf speakers I've ever heard. And I've heard many that it costs way more than that, and they don't sound better. Like the Atoms embarrass everything else I've ever tried. Like, they are just so damn good.
You can use them as your left and right channel, and then only buy the backs and the center and the subwoofer.
Here's the problem now. The new TV is just bigger enough that the atoms no longer fit on the stand next to it.
Oh, no.
So I have to either get those little pole speaker stands for them, which I don't love that option because that seemed like it would be, to get something top-heavy in a house that often has children running around, and it does not seem like a good idea. So I don't love that option. Also, those stands are really expensive. And you can get I can get new speakers for not that much more money than those stands. So I'm looking into floor standing options now, but it's very early in the search.
Just screw some tiny little wings onto the edges of the TV stand. Now they'll fit.
Yeah, but
I love that.
But yeah, right. Well, if I can somehow like drag them behind a truck for a while first and like spray paint them in weird ways, it might
have to
match.
be distressed.
Yeah, distress it in like the most hipster way possible, and then it'll look right.
Talked about that on the upcoming rec diffs just for you.
Awesome. but yeah, so now I'm looking into like floor speakers, but I'm probably just going to get more Paradigm floor. Paradigm makes floor speakers too, and they're similarly, from what all the reviews say, they are amazing values and amazing sound quality for what you're paying. So
I take it you didn't like measure the top surface of your table and the width of the television. You didn't do this math beforehand. So you got it. You took it out of the box. You put it on there. Okay, let me put the speakers back on. And you're like, oh, they don't fit.
Pretty much. I did the math a year ago, like with the TVs that were out a year. When I first started doing all this research, I did it then, and I knew then that I could get a 55-inch TV and that it would intrude roughly halfway into my speakers on either side. So I knew this was probably going to happen. Yeah.
You had a... Yeah, you ever see... I've seen this in a lot of people's houses. Two possible solutions that I've seen in real life. One, put the speakers slightly behind the television. Two, put the speakers in front of the television. I've seen both those solutions. Both of them boggle my mind.
Those are both terrible solutions.
They think, like, this is fine. Like... And I can't decide which is worse, blocking the television or having the speakers firing directly into the back of your television set.
Yeah, I would have a hard time figuring that out too. I think, I mean, either way, you're making something suck terribly. So yeah, I don't know.
Are these bookshelf speakers that you love? Are they super expensive? Let me look at them.
No, they're $200 each. So a pair is $400.
I think we have different definitions of
for bookshelf speakers made by a company that is like respected in the world of speakers. $400 for a pair is not incredibly expensive.
Like my whole set of speakers was like $400. It's 6 speakers for that price. Speakers are kind of like watches, unfortunately, where like you think if you're not like a watch person, you don't really know how expensive watches are, and speakers are like, oh, I'm going to buy some speakers. How much could they cost? And you're like, what? Is this filled with diamonds? I don't know. Yeah. And those, you're right, those are cheap in the grand scheme of things, but I was thinking, oh, bookshelf speakers, and Marco likes them. Maybe they're, $50 each. Nope.
Nope. Sorry. Come on. For good speakers, that is not ridiculous.
It's not. You're right. It's not like they're $900 each. But like when I hear bookshelf speakers, I start thinking like, oh, this is for people who don't want to spend big money on fancy speakers. So
no, because I've had 2 pairs over the years. The second pair of them is on my desk. These are like my computer speakers, because computer speakers are the biggest ripoff in the world.
They are the worst.
Like my entire time using a computer, ever since I have had a sound card, I have used regular speakers instead of computer speakers. Because every time I've tried computer speakers, I have been dramatically disappointed by how crappy they sound compared to how much they cost. Regular, even cheap regular speakers. Like when I first started doing this, I just had it was like a little Pioneer integrated stereo thing that I just had like in my room, with like the 2 speakers and the big unit in the middle that has like the cassette deck and the CD player all in one. And the whole thing was probably like $200. I just used those speakers as my computer speakers, and that sounded a million times better than anything else I'd ever heard.
How are you amplifying them? You were going through the big receivery thing?
Yeah.
The big...
Yeah, and the ones on my desk now, I have a second one of those tiny little like Class D desktop amplifiers, and that amplifies them just fine. Like, there are better ways to amplify speakers, but they're all much larger, and so you can do it. I've tried powered monitors, and powered monitors sound okay, but these Paradigm Atoms, again, they just kick their butts. Like, it's not even close. They just sound a million times better. And like a pair of powered desktop speakers is not that much cheaper than these Paradigms. Like, you're getting into the $400 territory pretty fast with those, and they really don't sound good. Even good ones like from brands like Klipsch and KEF and Bose and B&O, like, brands that like have a lot of fans. And I know I shouldn't have put Bose in that list. I'm sorry, but it has a lot of fans. Like, I've tried a lot of these. In some cases I've bought and returned them because they were so bad. Like, for whatever reason, there seems to be very little correlation between how much you pay for a set of speakers and how good they sound. And everyone has like their one thing that, oh, I bought this one pair of these like 60 years ago and they sound great. And that's like, once you find that, it's really hard to try anything else, because you try something else and you get it and it's on the worse end of the spectrum. I get the feeling you can, anybody can slap together some drivers into a box of particle board and say they're a speaker manufacturer, and it shows.
I've been surprised by the speaker system. I got some Logitech speaker, typical desktop speaker, computer speakers for my PlayStation 4, and I've gone through a series of quote unquote computer speakers on my Mac, and they all sound terrible, including the ones that I'm currently using. But like I don't use them for anything. They're fine. Like they were cheap and they're okay. But for the PS4, again, I'm playing games there, which is mostly like gunfire and explosions. I was surprised at how good the 2.1 setup, like, 2 stereo speakers and a comically large subwoofer to get that all those explosions to sound good. Makes a big difference when, for a PS4 that you're not playing on a TV, that you have a gaming monitor, 4K gaming monitor, 2.1 Logitech speaker system, and a PS4. So much more impressive than just a PS4 hooked up to someone's cruddy LCD TV playing through the TV speakers. I don't know if I can wholeheartedly recommend the product because it's kind of expensive and the power button flakes out, but I did buy a second one when I got my PS4 Pro and I shifted my old PS4 up to my son's room. I got a second one of the exact same speaker set, even knowing that the power button is going to eventually flake out. You just have to wiggle it the right way, and then it's fine. But
that is saying something though. Like if you're willing to like rebuy the same thing a second time, that does say a lot.
Yeah, and again, this is after years and years of terrible computer speakers, often by Logitech, often by the same exact company. And I realized how much I like them when I went to get speakers. I'm like, oh no, what if they don't make these anymore? Because that's always the problem with computer speakers. Like if you find a set that you like and they break, they don't make them anymore. So, but they do still make them. And I bought a second one, and so when mine eventually break, I will scavenge the new ones from my son's room and use them.
What's awesome about buying regular speakers? First of all, they're for sale for more than like a year, and then second of all, they last forever. They really, you can get speakers that last 50 years. Like, eventually the cones often dry out and have problems, but like they last a long time because they're just passive devices that they don't at least if they're really good, there's no electronics in them. There are circuits inside of them. There's like the crossovers and stuff, but there's not much there, and they just last. And it's like the Mac Pro thing. Like like my iMac is having all these weird problems now, and I'm going to have to like upgrade the entire computer if I want an upgrade. But like you get a decent pair of speakers, and if the amp flakes out, you can just replace the amp. If you want like bigger speakers, but you already have an awesome amp, you can replace the speakers. Like having components turns out really nice, which like all of our parents discovered 40 years ago.
Yeah, speaking of, my dad, who is a huge stereophile, and you know this because he believes in vinyl. Anyway, he has a set of Dahlquist speakers that he tells me were in his dorm room when obviously he was effectively a kid. Now, I'm sure the cones have been replaced on these, and presumably whatever minimal electronics are in there have been replaced from time to time. But to your point, Marco, I mean, these are 40-ish-year-old speakers that he is still using to this day. Not as his primary speakers on his nice stereo, but as kind of as the surround sound system and his accessory setup, if you will, his second setup. So yeah, this stuff lasts forever.
The other thing I find about speakers, though, is they're very often ugly. Like, that I wouldn't want them sitting next to my computer. For TV, usually you can hide them, but some of them, especially the fancier they get, like, even the boring ones, they're just plain ugly. And I don't know why speakers need to look like anything except for, like, the world's most understated rectangular solid. Like, why do they need to be weird shaped or have things poking out of them or be shiny or draw any attention to themselves at all? And even the ones that are supposed to look like boring little cubes always have some little flourish or chamfer or other thing to make the boxes look weird, and I wish they didn't do that.
Well, this is another reason why I love my Paradigm Atoms, because they come with the black cloth grills that you can just stick on there, and then it just looks like a boring speaker. Like it's a black cloth rectangle sticking on the front of a wooden rectangular solid. Like that's it. It's very simple. It comes in like 4 different colors. Like it is, again, it's possible to do great speakers. Like
it's got the wood grain if I'm looking at the right one here. I can't, because I would not put that next to my computer.
I have it next to my computer. It looks great. And you can also get it you can get it in different colors, different finishes.
Yeah, they look nice with and without the speaker covers in the front. Very simple. That would be fine. And they are just normal rectangular solids, but the wood grain, I don't like. That's part of the reason my current, what are these? I don't even know what the hell they are. They're probably like creative. Yeah, they are creative. These terrible creative speakers I have hooked up to my computer. They look nice. They don't sound like great, but they look okay.
I will say, one of the most attractive speaker things I've ever seen was computer speakers. It was what was, John, you would know, like those clear plastic carbon carton sticks with the big like lamp thing as the subwoofer.
Sound sticks with the big jellyfish subwoofer.
Yeah.
I like the subwoofer. Yeah, that looked cool. Like the subwoofer did look like a jellyfish, and it was really neat and clear, or whatever. But the sound sticks, I didn't like. I thought too many holes.
Well, I honestly, I'm not even sure I've ever even heard those. So I have no idea how they sound, but I honestly think like that should go down in history of computer industrial design. Like that's such a great design.
I like the Cube speakers better in terms of visuals. Like, do you remember the G4 Cube came with like these two little round balls that were just a single little cone in them? Same kind of the visual language of clear, but and you could see the electronics. I thought
I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
They nicely match the thing. The sound sticks always just seem so. They look like giant octopus tentacles. I know people. I think is Dan Morin. I think some people we both know got those back in the day and still use them and still have them. To your point about component stuff, it's like, what other stuff do you have from the era of the G4 Cube that you're still using? But if they're just plain old speakers, you can just keep using them because they're speakers and they work with every Mac that you buy, and everything works out.
That's the thing, like so many of like, and even, getting back to receivers and stuff, so many of the receivers these days, like the receiver is integrating certain HDMI standards that go out of date quickly, certain like, maybe it has like network streaming standards, maybe it has Bluetooth or AirPlay, or integrates with like Pandora. I mean, even my new TV now has dedicated hardware buttons on the remote for Amazon Video and Netflix, and that's probably not going to age that well in the grand scheme of things if TVs still last 10 years. And it's nice to keep things. You give up on some of the cool integration of like having things all in one. That this one box does all these different things and has integrated Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all this stuff. You give up on some of that if you go the separate component route. There's usually still a way to achieve it. You just might need like multiple parts, but I feel like long term, you're setting yourself up for a better outcome. And this is, again, why I really want to wait for the Mac Pro Tower rather than buying the iMac Pro this winter. Because I like having separate components, because most of the time in my life I have done things that way. And the few times I haven't, I've usually come to regret it.
But you won't. You'll buy the iMac Pro. So the sound sticks are still available, by the way. They're still for sale. The sound sticks apparently up to 3. Sound Sticks 3 by Harman Kardon.
Wait, really?
$170. You can order them right now.
That's actually not that expensive for what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think they look cool. I've never heard them, so I can't vouch for how good they sound compared to anything. I mean, you can look at it. I mean, you can see the components. Like, well, there's that size driver for the subwoofer, and there's these little tiny drivers for the left and right speakers, and it is what it is.
The other thing is, I have a feeling this is probably a design that looks better in pictures than it does like in real life, covered in dust and with the plastic faded and cracked and scratched. And
I bet the plastic holds up pretty well, but I just don't like how it even looks in pictures. Like, I like the subwoofer. I think that's a cute design, but the sound sticks, they look like octopus tentacles, and I don't like the little Cheerio life preserver base thingies. Don't like them.
Yeah, I guess those little bases aren't that great either. Yeah, you're ruining this for me. This is why do I do a podcast?
Just get the subwoofer and keep it on your desk as a curiosity. But fill it with M&Ms. Pour it down the little,
That's the other funny part too. Is like you put subwoofers usually out of sight. Like you put them like on the floor. Like you're not supposed to have this anywhere where it's visible. But
the thing about subwoofers is you can put them anywhere. Who's to say? You put them out of sight because usually they're these big black, cubes that you just want to get rid of. But this one is so nice. Put it on your desk, and because humans cannot localize low frequency sound as well as high frequency sound, it doesn't matter where you put it.
I will say on that though, I greatly prefer just big speakers that have their own woofers that can produce the low frequencies well enough to the sound of little satellites, and then one subwoofer somewhere in the room. Like,
I have heard this from you before, and I think your opinion of this is based on some very terrible 5.1 setups early on.
No. My opinion of this is based on liking music. That's what it is, really. Like, I totally agree with you that if what you're optimizing for is movies and TV sound, then having a subwoofer is cooler. Like, it sounds cooler that way. Like, you get more of like the big booms from explosions and stuff like that. But I don't like the way music sounds through that kind of setup. I think it sounds weird and unnatural and not how that was intended. I would rather have speakers that are pretty good at TV and movies and also really great at music than the opposite.
Well, we got to get you. Well, I mean, you can choose your left and rights to be standalone left and right channels that can reproduce all the frequencies. I mean, your receiver usually controls, like, you can control like the crossover of like what, you know, you could shift the cutoff of which frequencies go to the subwoofer for mixes that don't separately address it. But if you've got left and right channel speakers that can handle all the frequencies, you don't have to send anything to subwoofer in the case where you're just playing music. Although multi-channel music is a thing. Over Jason Snell's house, I heard, was it Crowded House 5.1 mix? It's not everybody's thing, but it is a thing.
Thanks so much for our 3 sponsors this week: Betterment, Audible, and Squarespace. And we will see you next week.
And now the show is over. Maybe leaving me to begin, 'cause it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. And it was accidental. You can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASYUSKCMarcoArment Marco Arment SIRAC USA Syracuse. It's
Do they have a multi-channel vinyl? 5.1 vinyl?
They don't even have stereo.
You just buy 5 records and you play them all at the same time. Like, what was it? The Flaming Lips did a thing. The Flaming Lips did a thing where you buy, wasn't it? You buy 2 vinyl albums and you play them both at the same time.
I have no idea.
Or maybe it was CDs. Anyway,
let me like what I like.
Mm-hmm.
Let people enjoy things, John.
I'm letting you enjoy things. I'm telling you, you might enjoy a thing where you get to play 2 records at the same time.
Double the fun, right? It's like double mint gum.
And yeah, as the part of the challenge is, it's a, you know, you like the ceremony. Now you have a physical challenge where you have to drop the needle. You have to drop the needle on the beginning track in exactly the same spot, exactly the right time, because you don't want the music to be out of sync.
Was it
Flaming Lips, Zerika.
Was it Double Dare that had physical challenges? They actually phrased it as physical challenge.
Yes, that was Double Dare. I was going to make that reference, but I didn't bother. But there you go. You got it.
You proud of me, John?
I am.
All I want is for you to be proud of me, Daddy.
Did you read that story, by the way, about
the oral
Double
history?
Dare? And there was the big, like, you know, inside story of Double Dare. And I think there was a separate story about, like, the video phone that you get as a prize on Double Dare.
I know exactly the video phone you're thinking of. I don't recall having seen the story about that. But I did read and freaking loved the oral history of Double Dare, which was actually written, which is a little weird. I mean, I guess it was
sounds like
an
a
oral
written
history. Exactly, but nevertheless, it was. Oh, I think there might have been an associated like brief podcast, which I never bothered listening to. Maybe that's what it was. It doesn't matter. If you are a child, or if you were a child of the '80s and watched Double Dare on Nickelodeon, this is absolutely worth your time. It was a fantastic read.
And now you have to find that link for the show notes.
I already have it. This is
Boom.
my other job other than being chief summarizer in chief.
I love Double Dare.
Double Dare was the best. And that's the thing. Like, I've actually said to people, I don't think I've ever said it on the show, but I've said to people in real life, because apparently this isn't real. But anyway, do you remember that when you were a kid, the grand prize from Double Dare was, as already mentioned, a video telephone where you would get 2 of them, I believe, and you could put one in one person's house and one in the other person's house, and you would get like a postage stamp, and that's not much of an exaggeration, a postage stamp sized image that had a frame rate of like one new image every 5 to 10 seconds. And that blew my mind when I was 10 or whatever. And now in my pocket, I can have an HD call with anyone on the planet, anywhere I am. I mean, the future is amazing. You know what else is amazing about the future, speaking of? Net neutrality. Net neutrality is pretty amazing.
Is it so amazing?
We should fight for it.
I think it would be amazing if we maintain it. I'm not sure the future is going to be so amazing in that department.
So true. So what's going on with this? Why do we care about that today as we record on Wednesday the 12th?
I'm going to go through net neutrality all over again. I think people who don't know what it is or what we're talking about, there is a video. It's a video from Vi Hart explaining net neutrality in her unique way. It's actually an updated version of an older video, which gets us more towards why we're talking about this again, where she just took her old video and then bookended it by a preface and then the things that have changed. This is a battle that we thought we had, if not won, at least sort of got things moving in the right direction. But for a variety of depressing reasons, things are moving back in the wrong direction in these parts on seemingly all fronts. And net neutrality is no exception. So you get someone who used to be, a lawyer for Verizon or whatever. You get some industry person in to come in and do something that most people in the United States don't want, which is roll back net neutrality to make it so that big corporations can charge different amounts of money for different customers of the internet instead of just being a common carrier, blah, blah, blah. Watch the video to have explained. The annoying thing about this is, like, you get fatigued. Like, how much do I have to hear about and care about net neutrality? Like, didn't we go through this all where we all got all up in a tizzy and everyone write your congressperson, and it seems like we're doing that all the time, and how many things can I possibly care about? And I don't, I've heard about net neutrality too much. I don't even care anymore. Just don't bother me. Or if you do want to do something about it, you're like, well, what do? I did a bunch of stuff last time. Do I do that same stuff again? Ars Technica has a good article here entitled How to Write a Meaningful FCC Comment Supporting Net Neutrality. Now, the depressed person in me who sees everything falling apart in this country these days thinks it doesn't matter how meaningful your comment to the FCC is, because the stupid Verizon lawyer who's running the thing is going to ignore it and do whatever the hell big corporations want, because he doesn't care what people want. He doesn't care what's good for long-term anything. All he cares about is screwing everything up. And that's exactly why he was appointed to his position. Anyway, but if you are not in that type of dark mood for the moment that you read this article, this will help you do the best that you can possibly do. Instead of just clicking a bunch of buttons and filling out this thing order, how can you write a meaningful comment that has a chance of influencing things? And who knows, it kind of sort of worked last time before everything started moving backwards again, and it might work this time. So two links in the show notes. One, watch Vi Hart's video for, it's not the best explanation of net neutrality because it's many faceted, and a lot of times they pick an analogy, like it's kind of like if this happened, and in some ways it's better to just straight up explain it without analogy. But the analogy she uses is reasonably representative, even if it does gloss over a lot of things, and there are other aspects to it. But anyway, watch that to have it explained, and it's fun and interesting. And if you already know what it is, but you feel fatigued by the idea of trying to battle against this again, give the How to Write a Meaningful Comment thing a read. See if you can do more than just check a box or put your name on a list or whatever, but actually pour out a little bit of your heart and your angst and even your anger in the most constructive way possible, and do what you can do to fight the same fight that we continue to be fighting over and over
and over and over and over again. There's also a great video, it's only about 3.5 minutes, from CGP Grey that was from the last time we were all at this exact same rodeo. This one's from 2014, so maybe it wasn't the last time, but you get my point. That is also very good. I've seen this Vi Hart video, or at least the original iteration thereof, probably also from 2014, which it is excellent as well. It's important, I think, and I was going to say, I think that anyone who really has any inkling as to what's going on that isn't paid by one of these big corporations will say net neutrality is the only way to go. But then we elected who we elected. So obviously people think differently. So anyway, if you care about things like this podcast and you want to get it reasonably quickly and not have people get in the way of it, maybe talk to your representatives about net neutrality.
Oh, and on that, by the way, a lot of the examples they give you of like, here's what could happen if we didn't have net neutrality. The difficulty is if you wanted to be like, if you wanted to actually extrapolate, like if you had to put money on it, like what would actually happen if we roll back to net neutrality? It's such a sort of systemic boil the frog kind of thing that we're already halfway through to, that is difficult to convince people exactly how bad it would be. Like the things that we describe are like, oh, your podcast will download slowly, right? Yeah, that could happen, but in general, the powers that be, the powers that are lobbying behind this, that want this, they want to they want the net not to be neutral. They're not that dumb. They would do it in the same way they've done everything else. Like, how do we all of a sudden wake up and find ourselves with only one ISP choice in like half the country, right? They did that slowly and insidiously by merging and lobbying to allow larger and larger companies to merge together. And it's kind of like a thing like, what do I care if Time Warner is purchased by whatever, or this cable company buys that? I don't care, whatever. I just want my TV. Like, people don't care at that level. And slowly these giant companies are doing things behind the scenes that is making people's lives, like, that is closing the door on things that can make people's lives materially better. You could have faster internet access for less money. They're essentially taking away something that you never had, like progress, essentially. Like, and you don't know how cheap broadband is in the rest of the world, and how other people have choices, and how if you have a common carrier that people can actually compete based on price and features. Like, if you've never experienced that, it's like, it's the lack of something. Like, I've never known it could be this way, therefore the lack of it doesn't make me feel like I'm losing anything, but you are, right? That's how they do it. And so if they made the net non-neutral and cut all these deals and extorted money from, as they've already done, from Netflix to get their bits to carry over the wires, and startups that you've never heard of and never will hear of are not allowed to enter against the big, like, you will not notice, most people will not notice the lack of things that you could have had. But that is really the worst effect of this stuff that people, that you will never get because competition has been eliminated, and, people in the middle are extracting value from everybody else. And it's like, you may have like a mid-level malaise of like, oh, Comcast is all I can get and I hate Comcast, but it's like, oh, I hate airlines. Airlines have a similar problem of monopoly and consolidation. But anyway, it's usually not as comically evil as like, I was watching my show and they turned it off, and they're not going to do that, right? They're going to do it in a much more insidious way, and they're going to end up finding a way to continue to charge you more for worse service and make you feel powerless against it. And you were like, how did we even get here? And like, net neutrality is like the last bastion, literally the last one, because they've already got everything else that I just described. That is like, and if we could just get that one last little bit and be able to be the gatekeeper for all internet content for the last mile for everybody, and we've already chased out all competition and consolidated our power structure, we just need this last little bit. That's why like everyone is fighting for this tooth and nail, because it's not as like we're fighting for some sort of utopia. We're just trying to hold on to the last shred of what we have in this country. And I'm sure people listening in other countries, it's better where you are, but as with many things in the U.S., for historical reasons and stupid governmental reasons, many things are terrible, and internet access is one of them. And so send help.
Yeah, that's I can't add anything to that. That wouldn't be just dark and depressing.
I mean, if you want to be optimistic, as people pointed out, like the previous head of the FCC was also an industry person, and I mean, we did all the public comment and we did all this rallying or whatever. And eventually, we did, we did get the result we wanted. Of course, that was a very different administration, and that's where Marco gets depressed again, and we all get depressed. Like, that was a different administration, but anyway, the fact that we have made progress on this in the past means it is not 100% impossible that we can't make progress on it in the future. And as we've learned, administrations change, right? Every 4 to 8 years. So even if we lose this one, we can still win the war. Unlike things like I can't even talk about Supreme Court justices. Like these are things that can change with the administration. So anyway, this is a great. We'd be great at rallying people to political action by telling them exactly how useless everything they could possibly do is. But we have to do it. It's like all we can do. We can vote. And we can register to vote. We can vote. We can be active politically, and we can do when they call for public comment on things, and the FCC does. Publicly comment. You're part of the public. Comment. That's what it's for. Even if you think you're going to be ignored.
Do you think the FCC gives a crap about public comments? Like, do you think?
No.
I mean, like
But
Congress
I don't,
doesn't
but
either.
We're
It's
trying,
like,
to get people to do something.
like who in what part of the population is asking for any of these laws that they're trying to shove through? Like, no one's asking for this.
Big companies with a lot of money. That's who's asking
Right?
for it.
There's like 4 companies asking for it. 0 part of the population asking for it. You know, just like so much else that's going on, there's like no one is asking for this except the people passing the laws.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you have it. Another rousing episode of ATP. Enjoy.